"Mother, hurry up and do something. Can't take this any longer," I said in a whisper, my voice trembling with desperation as my pulse pounded in my chest. The gravity of the situation compelled me to halt and retreat from the precarious equilibrium we were in, yet her eyes and her deliberate movements halted time. Was it too late? To withdraw, we mourn the events that are about to happen, or was this only the beginning of an unavoidable journey? My name is Thomas, and I am 20 years old. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood with occasional green areas and tree-lined streets. My stepmother Maria was drenched by my father Mark. She has always been kind to me, but even from the beginning, I sensed a tension that neither of us was willing to face during our childhood. I have always been the type to keep to myself and have never sought attention, but things changed when Maria entered our lives. At first, her gestures, the way she smiled when she greeted me, and the long look in her eyes as we passed each other in the hallway were all inconsequential. Showed her attempt at being kind, but there was an unspoken emotion she tried to hide under her politeness. At first, I wasn't bothered because she was my father's wife, and I thought it was improper to add problems, but gradually I noticed oddities like her eyes darting nervously when I got home from school late and her laughing seeming too excited at family dinners, but these were small. Details are easily forgotten, or so I thought until one summer evening when things changed. It was hot and muggy, and the air felt heavy and oppressive. My father was away on a business trip, so Maria and I were left at home, and I spent most of the afternoon reading old magazines while the warm glow of the setting sun cast long shadows across the living room. Maria didn't say anything. That evening as well, she hummed softly to herself in the kitchen while preparing dinner. The sound was gentle and recognizable. I have consistently liked her gracefulness. Her movements were smooth and instinctive, akin to a dancer oblivious to her own allure, yet that night was distinct. Uncertain of the cause of my feelings, I observed her and couldn't help but perceive her apparent aloneness. I had observed her numerous times previously, but the manner in which she stood slicing vegetables, her silky blonde hair cascading over her shoulders made her appear as if she were a person I had never genuinely acknowledged until that instantly I rose from the couch, stretched languidly, and proceeded to the kitchen uncertain of my intentions to speak or whether I wished to articulate anything at all. However, as I approached, I noticed her look up, her blue eyes locking with mine. Her gaze at me at that moment was distinct. A subdued intensity prevailed. Our exchange contained an element beyond the routine cordial glance we had exchanged numerous times, which felt intimate. My pulse rate accelerated, and for a little while, silence enveloped us. "Is everything okay?" I said, the words spilling out of my mouth before I could stop them. Maria blinked, her expression changing from one of surprise to one of caution. "Yes, I'm just tired," she answered. It seems like today has been a long day because she went back to work, but I could still feel her eyes on me. I watched her carefully as she chopped the vegetables, the knife moving through them with such a soft rhythm that it was difficult to look away if you needed help. Let me know that I spoke in a softer tone than I had anticipated. I wasn't sure why I said that because I usually don't act so assertively, but the tension in the room evoked a side of me that had been dormant for years. Her smile, albeit limited, expressed hesitancy in her response. "Thank you, Thomas." "Thank you." I accepted your compassion and started to go, but she spoke before I could. Once more, her tone has become more subdued. "If you are willing, I would appreciate your help with a matter. The sink is not working properly, and I think there is an obstruction in the pipes. You have always excelled in that area, so I became immobilized." The sudden change in tone made my stomach tighten. Maria never asked for my help with anything other than simple tasks, and her earnest yet somewhat casual manner of expression surprised me. However, before I could reply, I found myself agreeing to help her with something that felt strangely personal. "Yes, I can examine." But I accompanied her to the small bathroom next to the kitchen, where I squatted down to inspect the pipes under the sink. I sensed Maria's presence behind me. Her footsteps were soft yet each echoed in my mind. Quickening my heartbeat, I pulled at the pipes, attempting to remove the obstruction. However, my mind continually returned to her. I sensed her presence behind me. Observing the atmosphere between us was intensely charged, and I could not evade the feeling that a change had occurred while I manipulated the wrench, attempting to concentrate. I abruptly sensed her touch on my shoulder. "Do you require assistance?" she inquired of her voice, and subdued. Her unexpectedly gentle touch remained momentarily sufficient to evoke a ripple across my body. I straightened, and for the first time our eyes connected, I discerned the vulnerability in her glance, a quality I had never observed previously. She appeared uncertain and nearly delicate. The tension in the room was palpable and stifling, compelling me to suppress the desire to extend my hand towards her. I believe I comprehended. I spoke softly. But my ideas were jumbled. What happened between us was what immediately made me aware that for a few periods, none of us said anything, and the stillness hung heavy and oppressive, as though the only sounds left by the outside world were our breathing and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then, suddenly, she moved closer, her hand still on my shoulder, and she said, "Thomas," in a voice that was hardly more than a whisper. Her words startled me, and I tensed, unsure of how to stop my heart from racing with every beat. She was hinting at what I was feeling, and it was resonating stronger than the prior time. Wasn't sure if this was suitable. She continued talking while trembling a little, but I couldn't ignore it any longer, and suddenly everything changed. I tried to understand what she was saying, but my heart was racing. "I have been thinking about you and our relationship," and the words kept repeating in my mind, each time causing a wave of doubt and unexpected longing to wash over me. Maria's hand was still on my shoulder, her fingers warm against my skin, and for a while I wasn't sure whether to lean in or pull away from the quiet, which was only broken by the soft hum of the refrigerator. The corner seemed to be a moment in time, and I was acutely aware of her presence. It felt like the walls were enclosing us in a strange bubble, and I took a shaky breath in an attempt to slow my racing heartbeat. "What do you mean by the words?" She escaped before I could think about it, with a mixture of curiosity and an unknown depth that I was not ready to face. She looked very vulnerable, as if she were about to say something she might later regret, but despite her uncertainty, there was a subtle confidence in her demeanor that suggested she had been holding this emotion for a long time and could no longer hold it. Thomas whispered to me, bringing me closer until I could feel her breath on my cheek. "There is an unexplainable connection between us that has been growing since our first encounter. I am aware that this is incorrect, but I am unable to refrain from thinking about you, as if I am in search of the appropriate words." Her revelation hung in the air like a thin thread that could snap at the slightest agitation, and my mind spun in all directions, each thought more contradictory than the one before. One of these people was my stepmother, with whom I had cohabited for the past 2 years. She had consistently shown me kindness and respect. Although this situation was markedly distinct, this was a confession, an acknowledgement of a desire I had not before recognized or deemed necessary. I swallowed with difficulty, attempting to comprehend everything. "Maria," I said, my voice scarcely above a whisper, discernible as I retreated a step. The gravity of her words struck me profoundly. "This is incorrect. You are my stepmother." She momentarily closed her eyes, absorbing the gravity of my words. Nevertheless, upon reopening them, an unmistakable expression lingered that I could not overlook. It was a blend of need, desperation, and a gentler emotion that constricted my chest. "I am aware that," she responded gently. Her voice quivers, "yet it does not alter my emotions. It does not modify my desires." Her remarks constituted a subdued entreaty, revealing a weakness I had never previously encountered. "Ed," she began to disrobe in an attempt to entice me, her gaze fixed on her own skin, which was fair, supple, and exquisite. She donned a breezy style garment that accentuated her bosom, elevating it appealingly, and I found myself unable to resist any longer. The room appeared to constrict, the distance between us diminishing with every breath I inhaled. I sensed her. Every instinct told me to pull away and put some distance between us, but a deeper part of me wanted to stay and explore the feelings that had suddenly surfaced between us. The atmosphere around us felt dense, as if it were filled with an unspoken energy, a magnetic force from which I could not escape. My hand instinctively reached out to hers, but I stopped just before our fingers touched. "The moment seems delicate, and any mistake could ruin it. Do you feel it too?" Shalongate, her voice scarcely above a whisper, as though she feared the response. Apprehensive of the vulnerability of her heart exposed in the solitude of this moment, I accessed the veracity, pressing heavy upon my chest. I had never experienced such internal conflict. One part of me yearned to escape the tumultuous emotions within, guilt, confusion, and apprehension regarding the implications for our family, while another darker aspect could not refute the undeniable connection between our magnetic chemistry and the visceral responses my body exhibited to her every glance and touch. For an extended moment neither of us uttered a word. Time appeared to elongate, with each second extending painfully into the next. The room was quiet save for our breathing, yet the tension felt poised to erupt. The walls constricted around us as she approached once more, so near that I could sense the warmth emanating from her. Without uttering a single word, her hand delicately ascended towards my trousers. Her fingers tender against my skin, I immobilized my emotions with a pounding heart. Immobilized and breathless, she leaned in gradually, her face mere inches from mine, revealing for the first time the unadulterated longing in her eyes. Thomas's lips hovered just a whisper away from mine. I want you to understand that I never intended for this to occur, yet it is a reality. My feelings for you are genuine. And before I could articulate anything or comprehend the significance of her words, she kissed me. The kiss was not hasty or impulsive, rather, it was slow and deliberate, implying that she had been waiting for this moment for far longer than any of us realized. Her lips were soft against me at first, but as the kiss deepened, it became more passionate and enveloping, as if all else in the world had dissipated. Neither past nor future existed. All that existed, was the intensity of the moment and the undeniable synergy between us. I reciprocated her kiss with my body undermining my intellect. Overwhelmed by a torrent of emotions, desire, shame, and longing, I drew her closer by grasping her waist, feeling her body press against mine, gentle and warm, reciprocated her hands entwining in her hair, her body drawing nearer to mine as if we were two puzzle pieces that had finally interlocked. Each kiss and touch was akin to a revelation. The mistake was wrong and illegal, but I couldn't care less. Attention was solely on the taste of her lips, the movement of her body against mine, and the sensation of everything else dissipated in our presence when her hands delicately caressed the nape of my neck and our bodies synchronized as if time had ceased, rendering all else insignificant except for her embrace. The kiss intensified, leaving my mind in turmoil. She was my stepmother, my father's wife, and this was an inappropriate occurrence, yet her kiss and embrace rendered rational thought impossible. The kiss consumed us for an extended moment, leaving our breaths shallow when we parted. We stared at each other breathless and wide-eyed, trying to comprehend what had happened. I struggled to find the right words. I spoke softly. My voice was filled with emotion. But this is not true. Maria's eyes softened, and she moved away from me, giving me some space. She said, her voice trembling under the weight of her mixed emotions. I didn't mean for this to happen. Even though I'm not sure how to go, I can't deny the connection between us. My body is still alive from the sense of her touch and the memory of her kiss, but my mind is still in a state of humiliation and confusion. Nevertheless, we are unable to move further. I understood that she had gently interposed a tone of regret. I'm not sure how we got here, Thomas, but I can't deny it. I gazed at her, examining her expression for answers. I knew she lacked. The room once more felt oppressive, the atmosphere laden with unarticulated sentiments. Ultimately, I spoke, my voice trembling with the apprehension that I could not conceal. What transpired next? Maria hesitated, her eyes briefly descending to the floor before re-establishing contact with mine. I'm not sure how to handle this situation, Thomas, but I want you to know that my feelings for you go beyond what's appropriate. And yet they continue. Her remarks were candid and exposed, and the sincerity in her voice was unmistakable. The guilt that burdened me was overwhelming, yet I could not disregard the attraction I felt towards her, a connection that had developed between us in an undeniable manner. Perhaps we cannot revert to the previous state of affairs, I whispered, hoping not to lose you. Maria advanced, her hand extending to softly caress my cheek. She quietly assured me that we would not lose each other. Her words resonated with subdued passion. However, we must exercise caution. I agreed. This is something we can handle. Slowly realizing that what was about to happen would be complicated, I could not deny that there was something real between us at that moment, and neither of us could find it lacking. As the evening wore on, we avoided talking about what had happened anymore because there were no clear answers or simple solutions, but I continued to think about her and our relationship, knowing that this was only the beginning of an unexpected journey for us both. As the night progressed, the burden of everything hovered over us. I couldn't stop reliving the moment of her kiss. It felt like the world had disappeared, but now that I was alone, reality was encroaching again. There were too many complexities for me to understand, and I couldn't ignore my stepmother Maria. The guilt was too great, but the feelings were too strong to ignore Maria. I started, but my words were halting. I wasn't sure what I wanted to say, how one could explain something like this. How can you understand something that is both impossible and inevitable? Maria's eyes locked with mine. She said in a voice full of regret, I never wanted this plan, and I was equally as bewildered by the situation as I was, if not more so, exhibiting the reflection of uncertainty in her eyes. Not mention this, but now that it's happened, I can't ignore it any longer. I can only act as though it never happened, and I can't act as though you aren't everything to me. I never imagined that her remarks would affect me more deeply than I ever thought was conceivable. They were incredibly real, intensifying my feelings as I felt a similar yearning. My voice was shaking with passion as I talked, but it did happen even though I wasn't sure I could keep battling because the outcome did not match your objectives. What comes next? Maria looked away, her lips pressed together as she grasped the LED. I could see the conflict in her face as she struggled between her love for my father and the unbreakable bond that had grown between us. It went beyond simple attraction and was a deep connection that neither of us knew how to handle. I don't know, Thomas, she whispered softly. Her voice faltered, and I saw the tears that threatened to well up in her eyes. Her vulnerability reflected my own feelings, and I wanted to get in touch with her, but I was nervous and worried about the ramifications and possible consequences because I don't know what will happen next. I can't just brush it off as a mistake and act like there is nothing between us. Admit that my voice was hardly heard. I don't want to ruin our family, but I can't help but feel what I'm feeling. And each attempt to stop thinking you are futile, she nodded slowly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. As our conversation went on, it became clear that the line between right and wrong had become more and more blurred, with longing and sorrow defining it and entwining it with emotions and wants. This was irreversible, as we both realize. Unable to respond, I whispered, pulling back as my mind raced with conflicting ideas. I don't know what the future holds, but I can't get enough of you, Maria said. Shaking her head, neither can I, but we must exercise caution. We cannot hastily engage in actions that we may later regret. We need to reflect on this. Thomas, but even as she expressed her desire for me, I could sense her gaze in the unmistakable attraction between us. Despite the terror we both experienced, we remained silent for the remainder of the night, each absorbed in our own reflections on the distance between us increasing not due to a deficiency of intimacy but rather from the burdensome nature of our predicament of the moment neither of us could comprehend and snared us, yet it was an indelible experience. When I eventually retired for the night, my mind remained restless. I was unable to sleep or cease contemplating Maria, my stepmother. This occurrence was unintended, yet it transpired. And despite my effort to resist it became increasingly difficult to disregard the reality of our connection. The subsequent days were characterized by uncomfortable silences and furtive stares. The unarticulated strain that persisted in the atmosphere between us was dense and burdensome as we endeavored to comprehend the predicament we were in. Nonetheless, the connection was irrefutable, akin to an enduring spark, and with each encounter, my feelings intensified.